Hey guys, we are going to finish up lesson 2, day 2, and we have two more techniques that we're going to talk about. So the first technique we're going to talk about is turn the equation into a tangent equation. So this helps sometimes. You only want to do this, you only want to divide by cosine if like your purpose is to turn it into a tangent equation. So like a lot of times don't go all willy-nilly and just start dividing by like sine and cosine for no reason. Like that would be your purpose. So I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm going to just divide both sides by the cosine of x. So sine over cosine is tangent. So on the left-hand side, I have -7 tangent of x equals 1. So then I'm going to go ahead and just like divide by that -7. So I have tangent of x equals -1/7. And so now this should become like more familiar. So I'm going to multiply by tangent inverse. And so I have x equals tangent inverse of -1/7. Okay, so tangent is positive first and third, negative second and fourth. So I know that it's going to be in the second and fourth quadrant. I also know that it's not on the unit circle, so I'm going to type in my calculator. So tangent inverse of, and I do the +1/7. So I know that my reference angle is going to be about 0.41, I'm sorry, I can't talk, 0.142. And I'm going to apply it to the second quadrant and the third quadrant. So by now you should know for the second quadrant, you're going to take pi minus 0.142. And for the fourth quadrant, you're going to take 2 pi minus 0.142. And so when you do that, you get right at 3 in the second quadrant, and then 6.14 in quadrant 4. Okay, so number 2, go ahead, it's the exact same thing. So go ahead and see if you can get it set up. Your goal is to have the tangent of x equal some number. So I'm going to push pause and see how you do. Okay, so this was my process. So I just moved that 11 cosine of x over and divided it and got tangent. And then I took this 6 and divided it and ended up with this. So now I'm going to just kind of do what we have been doing. So tangent inverse. And go ahead and take it from there. Okay, so I multiplied both sides by the tangent inverse and got that. I knew that that wasn't on my calculator. So I just typed it in. And I found out that the reference angle is 1.07. So tangent's positive in 1 and 3. And so these are my steps over here. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, reach out to me on Remind and we can maybe Zoom and I can get you caught up on some stuff. Okay, so this is the last technique, and this is using square roots. So what I would do in a case like this is I'd move that 6 over. So I have 8 cosine squared x equals 6. And then I'm just getting that cosine by itself. So I'm dividing by 8. And so I'm going to go ahead and simplify this to 3/4. I think you could probably see why. Because when I take the square root of both sides, I'm going to have cosine of x equals plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. So square root of 3 over 2, that should look familiar to you. That's the unit circle. And notice I have plus and minus. So I'm going to go ahead and think about, I'm going to deal with all 4 quadrants. So you can break it up. I just kind of think about it as finding the reference angle and then just applying it to all 4 quadrants. So if you'll notice on the unit circle, when you have cosine is square root of 3 over 2, that's a 30-degree reference angle, or pi over 6 for our purposes. So in quadrant 1, it's just going to be pi over 6. In quadrant 2, I'm going to take pi minus pi over 6. or just let's just look at it on the unit circle. I don't have my unit circle here, so I was doing it by hand. So in quadrant 2, it's 5 pi over 6. And then if you look in quadrant 3, that 30-degree reference angle, that's going to be 7 pi over 6. And in quadrant 4, that's going to be 11 pi over 6. So all of these are your answers to that problem. Okay, so for number 2, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to move that 10 over and get 12, and then divide by 7. So this one, as you can see, it's not going to turn out as nicely. So I have tangent squared x equals 12 sevenths, and then I'm going to take the square root of both. So I have tangent of x equals plus or minus, I'm just going to keep it like this. So I have a whole bunch of yuckiness going on right now. So again, you have all 4 quadrants here that you're applying that to. So I'm going to find the reference angle. So I'm just going to take the tangent inverse. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Of square root of 12 over 7. And like this whole thing is like square root of 12 sevenths. So make sure you're typing that in correctly. And I'm going to type that whole thing into my calculator. Okay, so you should get the reference angle as 0.92. So make sure you're okay with that. So now let's do some different colors. There's lots going on here. Okay, so now in quadrant 1, it's going to be 0.92. And then in quadrant 2, I'm going to take pi minus 0.92. And so when I do that, that ends up being 2.22. And then for quadrant 3, I'm going to take pi plus 0.92. And that ends up being 4.06. And for this one, I'm going to take 2 pi minus 0.92. And that ends up being 5.36. And so these are your 4 answers. Okay, so these are our last 2. So go ahead and try number 1 and see how you do. Okay, so this is my process. So I just like solve for cosecant of x. And so notice here that the cosecant of x equals 2 over the square root of 3. And I did not rationalize it because I don't like cosecant. So I knew I was going to flip it and put that square root on top. So it's square root of 3 over 2. Notice that's on the unit circle. So I ended up with this. So the next thing that I want you to notice is this. So we are going to be in the realm of degrees. So when you're looking at your unit circle, don't look at radians, look at degrees. So I know that my reference angle is going to be 60. And I also know that it's going to be in quadrants 1 and quadrants 2. So in quadrant 1, it's just going to be 60 degrees. And in quadrant 2, I'm going to take that 180 minus 60, which is going to be 120. Okay, so for this one, we'll go ahead and do this one together really quickly. So I can take the square root of both of them. So I get secant of x equals plus or minus 4. So just like I did over here, I'm going to change that to cosine of x equals plus or minus 1/4. So again, I'm looking at all 4 quadrants when I do this. So I know that I'm going to have 4 answers. So I am looking for the answer, the inverse cosine of 1/4. Because when I do this, I'm going to get x equals cosine inverse plus or minus 1/4. So what I always do is find my reference angle. And don't forget, guys, you're going to have to change it to degree. I almost forgot that. Okay, so cosine inverse of 1/4 is going to be 75.52 degrees. So I know that's my answer to quadrant 1. So 75.52. So go ahead and do the other 3 quadrants and see if you can get the answers. Okay, so this was our answer for quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 should have been 104.48 degrees. Quadrant 3, 255.52 degrees. And quadrant 4 is 284.48. And we are done with part 2.